Time doesn't erase murder. It just hides it better. They said the case was closed. They said no one was watching. But someone always is. Enter the shadows, where every whisper is a clue, and the line between justice and obsession disappears. This is Santana True Crime.
Welcome to Santana True Crime. Tonight, I've got a special guest with me. I've got Lauren Samples. Lauren is the host of Paradise After Dark. She is the founder of the Themis Project. And more importantly, she is the author of Through the Shadows, Unsolved Crimes, and the Search for Truth. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Lauren, what's really impressive, one to start out with, is the names that you actually got to contribute to this book. Huge fan of Nic Edwards. I'm sure everyone's heard of True Crime Garage. Sharon Newman-Edwards, she is the host of Justice Delayed. And then Robin is the host of The Trial Went Cold. And then Kelli Brink, she's been around forever. She's actually been on my show as well. Really great in all avenues of true crime. She's got some books and some hilarious shorts people need to check out. When you were making this book, did it start out as a collaboration, or what was the process behind it?
Well, no. The book actually started out as a deep dive into one specific case. And it took me about 3 years in total, and it just morphed into adding different cases and then adding different voices to the book, and over time just turned into what it is. But yeah, it started out as something completely different.
That's really interesting. Let's start actually from the beginning because this book really covers a lot of ground, and I don't want to give everything away. People need to buy it. It's available on Amazon, and there's a Kindle version, and I believe, is there an Audible version as well?
There is, yep.
Okay,
It's on
so
Audible.
you can get them on all three, and I'm sure if you go to your local bookstore, you can request it. But you started out, I believe, when you were in high school, you wanted to be an FBI agent, right?
I did.
You thought that the Navy would be kind of a good path to gain some experience and build up your resume?
Exactly. That's exactly why not exactly why I joined the Navy, but that was my goal.
Can we hit on that? Because I've found you're probably the first person I've interviewed who'd been a law enforcement officer in the Navy. What was that experience like?
Well, I'd say it was very similar, but very different to regular law enforcement. We went to a police academy. The Navy does their academy at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. And we went through everything that a normal civilian police academy would go through. But then when I went in, my experience was I did harbor patrol the majority of the time that I was in the Navy. And then I actually spent the majority of my time over in Bahrain in the Middle East and working like police boats over there. So it was a little different than, maybe your experience as a police officer. But I did gain all the knowledge and everything I think that any regular police officer would.
Yeah, well, you don't just have that. You also became a paralegal.
Yes.
And I'm sure I know that you've had some experience on the criminal side as well as in family law.
Yeah.
So between that and the military, it sounds like you're very well-rounded.
Well, I like to think so.
And not to mention your husband, his father was a canine officer, right?
Yep, he was.
So when you're looking at the two of you hosting a podcast, that's kind of a perfect combination of having someone that grew up in law enforcement and has one perspective, and then you've got the practical experience of being in the military and also on the civilian side. Can we talk about when you were a paralegal? Is there anything that you took away from that position that has kind of helped you today as being an author or being a podcaster?
Well, yeah, I obviously, well, I went to school. I got my degree in paralegal studies. So obviously, I learned a lot about the law in general and specifically Florida law, criminal and family, and all around. Actually, I had to take all the law classes, but yeah, I learned a lot about the law and how the legal system works. And every single law class that you take, the very first day, the very first class goes over the Constitution and breaking it down, by the amendments and why the law works the way it does. So I guess I could kind of have a better insight than, just a casual true crime listener or, anyone like that, because, I dealt with it. I did, legal proceedings. I wrote legal proceedings. I filed them. I dealt with clients in criminal law and family law. So I got a lot of people experience too. One of the things they say is criminal law is bad people on their best behavior, and family law is good people on their worst behavior. So it was quite an experience.
I bet. I've been through both aspects. I've been divorced and I've also been a police officer, and I certainly agree with you on that. So, in the Ford, Nic Edwards described you as a bulldog and an angel. Is
Thanks,
that
Nick.
something that just is your natural personality, or is that something that developed over time?
Uh, Maybe a bit of both. I My cheeks are turning red. Um, yeah, I think a bit of both. I mean, I've always been very, when I set my mind to do something, or if I'm trying to find something out, I will, you know, do everything I can to figure it out or get done what I want to get done. And then the angel part, I guess, I don't know, maybe you want to ask my husband about that, but I do try my best to be a good person and be a victim's advocate and work as hard as I can to help people when and where I can. So I think that's what he's referring to.
Well, before the show started, that was one of the things I was kind of getting at, is that a lot of people assume that when you've got a podcast, I know you've been invited to Crime Con and you go and you've got a book out, and people probably assume that this is just a profit engineering business where it's really about giving back and giving people a voice and fighting for those underdogs. And I mean, your shirt says everything, the Florida Themis Project.
Yep.
I assume you're not making any money from doing that
No,
project.
no, we're not.
Can you tell us about that project?
Well, the Florida Themis Project was something that I wanted to start for a long time. And then about a little over going almost 3 years ago, I actually put it into action. And there's a good group of us. There's about 10 of us that what we do is pretty much anything we can to help in anything we can when it comes to missing people or unsolved crime cold cases in Florida. And what I mean by that is, well, first of all, every month we choose a case, either an unsolved murder case or a missing person, and we do a public awareness campaign, which is a big social media push. We've done things like flyers. We've gotten billboards put up for, unsolved cases. We work pretty closely with a couple of the Crime Stoppers in Florida, and we've teamed up with them in these public awareness campaigns. And other than that, if things come up, like there's a missing person and any of us are available or close enough or able to travel, we would like to, actually be there and helping with any kind of searches. Obviously, it's not feasible to do every single one, but we do a lot of things like send water, snacks, bug spray, raincoats, anything, that they need for a search. We've helped a lot of people, just as an example, there was a woman missing out of St. Augustine, Florida, and she had a bunch of cats, and her family members didn't know what to do. They didn't really have the money to buy cat food for all these cats. So we did the research and found a local rescue that would donate cat food for them. Like doing that kind of legwork for people that are in a crisis at that moment.
Right.
They just need the extra help. And pretty much anywhere we can help, anything we can do to just help these families and these loved ones and these friends in their probably worst moments of their life, anything we can do to make that easier, that's our goal.
Did any of that stem from, I saw where in 1998, one of your friends who you played softball with, Wendy, went missing, and you later found out what happened to her. But I assume, were you also 14 at the time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can
Wendy
you tell
and
us about that?
Yeah, Wendy, we weren't super close friends, but we were friends and we played on the same softball team. And it was actually during the softball season that she went missing. And, at that age, you think you're invincible and you think, oh, that'll never happen to me. That'll never happen here. That's not going to happen to anyone I know. And that was really a big reality check, that things like kids go missing, bad things happen, and there's bad people in the world. And that was really my first firsthand experience with, something tragic like that. So, I mean, really that sticks with me. And my dad was and I mentioned this in the book, my dad was our coach, one of our coaches, and he coached Wendy for, I don't know, more than 2 years, I think. I mean, we played for a long time. And I know it always bothered him. And he would just randomly, 20 years later say, I wonder what happened to Wendy. Because, she was actually never found.
Right.
They pretty much have a really good idea of what happened and who was responsible, but she's still never been found. And it still kind of haunts me, that's never been resolved. So yeah, it does sort of stem a little bit from that.
I was just thinking of how, as an adult, how you see that. Is that something that you like rework in your mind and think about what should have been done or what could have been done? And I know it's not fair to apply 2025 standards to 1998 standards, but in this case, we know that the lead suspect burnt his own car to destroy evidence. Have you kept tabs on him at all?
The last I heard, which was probably 4 or 5 years ago, was that he was homeless and living out in Las Vegas. He actually, I haven't looked recently, but he is active on Facebook, and his posts are so bizarre. I mean, he's really wacky, just creepy, wacky, makes no sense. He posts a lot of videos of himself just talking nonsense. And well, there was two suspects. The main suspect, that was Ronald DeBeppo. He's the one I'm talking about.
Right.
There was another suspect who's now in prison for uh, lewd and lascivious actions against minors.
Gotcha. So that would kind of make sense with luring a 14-year-old out of her house.
Exactly, yeah.
Because she was not forced out, as far as we know, right?
No, she had met Ronald DeBeppo weeks earlier, and she snuck out of her house to go to a party with him. And she went to that party. She left that party with him and hasn't been seen since.
Gotcha. Let's talk about, for a little bit of, you have a lot in this book about why people consume so much true crime, and especially women. And I found that very interesting because this is still a new show. I'm trying to find my audience, and you pointed out some of those reasons for why women seem to either A, have the most podcasts or all over social media talking about true crime, and they're the big consumers. Can you give us some feedback of why it's like that?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think that women have the mindset. It's not necessarily fact that women are more often victims than men, but women feel more vulnerable than men. And I feel like studying crime and studying true crime, things that have actually happened, and seeing the outcomes of, what happens, and it's sort of like learning, even if it's on a subconscious level. I feel like women want to know what happens so they can better prepare themselves and feel safer knowing they have the knowledge of what can happen and what to do if something does happen. And they'll see a story. It's like watching cautionary tales. You watch a true crime documentary about a woman that's murdered, and you see, well, what situation was she in, and how could I ever avoid that? Uh, that's one of the reasons I think that women are so into true crime. I mean, I think that's really the big one. And I've done quite a bit of research on that subject, and they've done psychological studies about why women are so interested in crime stories and true crime, and that's the big one. They just feel vulnerable, and it's like learning.
Yeah, that makes sense how it's almost empowering to have more knowledge. I don't know
Hmm.
if you've ever heard of this from a law enforcement perspective, but a lot of cops will have this dream of either not being able to pull out their gun or not being able to fire their gun or something to that effect where they're almost frozen. And they found that that's actually linked to lack of training. And then the more that you train, then those dreams become like less and less. So I think that that's kind of like women in true crime, where you're almost training on how not to be a victim and
Yeah.
what signs to look for in a guy, and making sure that your house is secure and having a plan if someone does break into your house, which actually happened to you.
It did. It did. And it was horrifying. I do talk about that in my book. And That's still one of the scariest experiences of my life. It was like textbook horror movie, and I wrote about it in the book. I was in the shower and someone came into my house, and luckily I'm safe.
Right.
My dog scared them away. I think they just came in and then ran right back out. And I never knew who it was. They never caught the person. I was living in Maine at the time, and I believe it was January, and it was my inner garage door that was left open. And they did call the police. The police came and they did find footprints leading from my garage outside around back and into the wooded area behind the house that I lived in. So, but they never found out who it was. It was really scary. And fortunately, we had already been planning to move back to Florida, and it was only a few weeks later that we moved, and I felt a lot better.
Yeah, and that's a few things about that. One, did you change your perspective or did you go out and buy a gun? Did you start to say, like, what should I have done better, or what could I have done in this situation? Or were you just kind of shocked? Or was it just, I'm getting out of this area, I want to be around more people?
I can't remember any specific changes that I made. I was super young. I think I was maybe 24, 25, maybe even 23. I was very young, and at the time that it happened, I still was in a point in my life where I don't know how to explain it, but now looking back on it, it's actually scarier to me now looking
Right.
back on the situation than it was at the time. And I think that fortunately I moved away and I moved home back to Florida where I'm from, where I'm familiar with, where my whole family is. And I felt much safer. And yeah, I don't remember making any specific changes, but I have made very specific changes to my life over the years since then. As far as personal safety and home safety.
Right. So I thought that was, speaking of Naples, Florida, I've been, wonderful place. Of course, everywhere where I've been, it's, you know, nice restaurants, no homeless people. You don't see any drug addicts. You don't see, I believe you described it as the guy shirtless in a pair of flip flops wrestling an alligator. You don't see any of that in Naples. Um, I would
No.
normally I used to go to Marco Island with my ex wife a lot, and then we would drive up to Naples for dinner. So I
Mhm.
just saw obviously the good parts, but you're saying that there's actually crazy people in Naples. And
Yeah.
I've learned from this book that people actually get murdered in Naples.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There's and the interesting thing I'll tell you, the inspiration for the title of our podcast, Paradise After Dark, was based on Naples, because a lot of people come to Naples for vacation. A lot of snowbirds come and spend their winters here. It is absolutely beautiful. The streets are clean, the sidewalks are clean, lawns are manicured. There's no homeless people. It's paradise, really. But a lot of stuff happens here, and a sort of a running joke for people who live here is the way that the news does not cover crime. They just don't. The Naples Daily News is our newspaper. You won't find many crime stories unless it's a big deal. There's been a few really big deals here. But the day to day, I mean, there are murders, there are shootings, there are robberies that happen. I know quite a few Collier County Sheriff's deputies and the Naples Police Department. I know them, and they tell me, that things like this happen.
Yeah, and that doesn't surprise me so much. I know where I worked in Southeast Raleigh, which that was where, open air drug markets were. And we had shootings all the time, and they did not make the news whatsoever. It was kind of a running joke that every weekend midnight shift we would go sit at the hospital because they had a place to eat called Cafe 3000, and we would just wait till someone walked in with a gunshot wound.
Wow.
It's one of those things, but they didn't make the news either.
Yeah.
So can we talk about a few of those cases? You've got several in there from the Florida area to include, St. Petersburg and whatnot. But is there any of them in particular that they need more attention? I know they all do.
Well, obviously, if you read the book, I'm very passionate about the Kyle Burtis case, which does not. It's gotten more publicity, I want to say, in the last 5 years, except that it happened in 2013, and it didn't really get much publicity until years later. As far as what's in the book, that would be one that I would really like the world to be talking about. Not that it's any more important than any of the others. There's so many cases, especially with the Themis Project, that we come across, and that we get emails and social media messages from family members. And I'll admit, there'll be someone email me, and okay, so just as an example, there's an unsolved murder from Fort Myers, Florida, of a man named Joshua Kent that happened in May of 2006. And you can't find anything. There's not even a news article. There's a flyer on the Southwest Florida Crime Stoppers website, and that's pretty much the only thing you can find about his case. There's really, because it's an open and active investigation, the sheriff's offices don't want to release any records or anything about any. We have a lot of trouble with open cases getting information. So that's one. It's not in the book, but that's one that has come to my attention recently. There's another one out of Pensacola area. His name was Matthew Bubba. They called him Bubba Suarez. And his case, I can't remember off the top of my head the exact date, but it's been over 10 years. And that's another one that the family reached out to us at the Themis Project, and there's just really nothing. And it's so hard. It's heartbreaking to know that there's a family and friends and loved ones that are still waiting and wanting answers. And then it's really frustrating when you're trying to help them and there's not even a news blurb. And I have lots of resources I go to look for information. I pay for, subscriptions to so many different online publications in Florida, and newspapers.com, and these even ancestry.com I'm a member of, because you can find a lot of information there too. And there's so many cases that there's just nothing.
Yeah, and I think that one of the reasons for that is that when you don't have family members that are behind it and pushing it publicly, and
Yeah.
when we wrote our book about Virginia Olsen, that was the problem, is her parents were, of course, elderly, and her brothers and sisters had not want to be, in the public eye. And so, the case just kind of fell under the doormat there and got lost, and her story wasn't told. We were the first one to do it. But you've got a chapter in here called "Don't Fuck with the Sisters."
Yeah.
Where
Yep.
do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. So I've been in this space in the true crime community for a long time now, and there's just this, I guess you might want to call it, phenomenon or something that I have found is sisters are the seem to be the biggest, strongest, most outspoken, active advocates for their siblings. I mean, if you think about some of the more well-known cases, Alyssa Turney's sister, Sarah Turney, she's out there, she's got a very successful podcast. She blew up on TikTok. She's got like over 1 million followers, and it's all advocating for her sister. There's Julie Murray, whose sister, Maura Murray, that's a very popular case in the
Right.
true crime community. In some lesser known, recently I met Bonnie Bell, who is just doing anything and everything she can. Her sister, Danielle Bell, was 14 years old and went missing back in 2001. So, and she's still to this day. I just saw her at CrimeCon. It was the second time I actually got to meet her face to face. And she's just out there. She's on TikTok. She's starting a podcast. Bethany Hassel, her brother Vladik Hassel went missing in Orlando in 2023, I believe, or 22. I'm not sorry. I have so many in my head. I get mixed up. The info's not right in front of me. But Bethany, man, she is just, I met her in Orlando at CrimeCon, and Vladik, her brother, went missing in Orlando, and she was at CrimeCon just going to every single booth, every podcaster, every exhibitor, everyone, people just walking around, and she was handing out flyers just for her brother. And you know what? He went missing in 2022. It had to be because Orlando CrimeCon was in 2023, and he had only been missing for like a year at that point. And she's gone on so many different podcasts now since then. Since she started, she's appeared on so many podcasts. Our podcasts. I wrote a whole chapter about Vladik Hassel in the book, and I wrote about Bethany and her sister Jody. And yeah, it's just sisters. It's just something I have found. They're the most staunch advocates, and it's really kind of beautiful. As a woman myself, and I have 2 sisters, and I just think, if something happened to my sisters, I'd go to the end of the earth and back, So it's just an interesting thing that I've noticed that I felt like I wanted to highlight in the book, because I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think that correlates with what you talk about with the ripple effect of victimization, where it does kind of spread out. And I think that if there's any positive in this, that it can bring people together. I mean, you were talking about, going to CrimeCon and the whole true crime community. And we were talking about this before the show too, of how you start to connect with people that have the same goals and the same missions, and everything starts to intertwine, and you're working together for this better purpose, like you are with the Florida Themis Project.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty awesome when you start working in this arena, you learn so much, especially when you start, it's one thing to meet other podcasters, other content creators, and getting to know them and, picking their brain and learning from them, learning about podcasting, learning about different avenues to create content, to bring awareness, learning about advocating. You can learn so much from so many people. And then you're also meeting and interacting and building relationships with victims and their family members. And that's where I take away so much knowledge, things that I wouldn't even have thought of, before I got into this. It never would have occurred to me. Just to give you a quick example, what was it? 2 weeks ago was CrimeCon in Denver. I was there, and I ended up sitting outside. The weather was absolutely gorgeous. I was sitting outside one evening with two ladies, and one was a fellow podcaster, one was a survivor. And this particular woman, she had lost her child many, many years ago. It's probably been 30 years ago. And one thing she said was she really doesn't like it when people say, oh, she lost her child, her life is over, she's never going to be the same, she's never going to find happiness again. Because, yeah, I think probably losing your child is the most horrible thing that could ever happen to you. But what she said brought some serious perspective to me, because she said, it's been 30 years and I have, had more children. I have had a beautiful marriage. I've had a good life. I would not want people who have just begun this journey to think that they will never find happiness again and that they'll never, recover. I mean, obviously you're never going to be the same, but, she brought that to my perspective, was that it's possible for people to be happy and find happiness in their life after something horrifying happens to them. So that's just kind of a recent example of something I learned from a survivor who lost their child to violence, murder. And it's really interesting for me to hear those kinds of things straight from the victims or the survivors, all these different perspectives. And it just helps me to better help people, if that makes sense.
It does. And one of the things I wanted to tie in is that I really appreciate of how vulnerable you are in this book. I mean, you talk about being a victim yourself and in personal detail. And you also are very vulnerable about the mistakes that you made as a podcaster. And I'm sure we all have our laughable moments of like forgetting to hit record, or, something messes up. But I do think that it's helpful for, again, people like me who are starting out and we have high expectations of ourselves, and just to know that someone that has been doing this for a while and is successful, is able to start a nonprofit. You've had some bumps in the road as well. I know that you started out with gaming headphones, and I believe your first episode you scrapped. And I do think that that's just, those are important moments that it's good to hear. That, you don't have to be perfect. If your heart's in the right place and you are trying to help people, then you'll be successful. Is there any particular kind of funny moments that you can share about some mishaps?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, we were terrible in the beginning. We had no idea what we were doing. I've never recorded anything of substance. I was just a true crime consumer, watching the TV shows and listening to the podcasts. And I just, was very confident that I could do it myself. And I was not very good at it. We weren't very good at it in the beginning. I think, her audio was terrible. I had no idea what I was doing when it came to editing. I've always edited myself. And that was a learning experience. And Ken, my husband and co-host, he used to say so much, and it drove me insane. And I would cut them out of the audio,
Uh-huh.
but I would save them. And at I think like the first 2 or 3 years, we always did a end of the year episode, like a 2018 wrap up, 2019 wrap up. And we would just talk about the year and everything we covered, and, you know, some updates on any of the cases we covered. And then at the end, I would play um 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 well
That's awesome.
yeah, so he's gotten a lot more a lot better, a lot more eloquent with the delivery and the recordings. Not as many but it's been about, gosh, in March was 7 years. So, yeah.
It's impressive. Most people quit before a year.
Yeah, and we almost quit a few times for several different reasons. You know, you get into it and you think you're going to be successful, and that everything's going to be great and you're going to make all this money. And truth be told, and I know I'm not the only one, you actually lose money for a while before you even begin to make any money. And I'll be honest, we pretty much just break even with it now at this point. We've been doing it for so long, we've already acquired and paid off for all the equipment, if you will. You know, the microphones and the fancy stuff. And so when you're doing it for so long, the expenses get lower. So, but still to this day, we do it because we want to, we like to. It's a good thing that we do. And we got into it to make money, to do this thing, to get recognition, I'm not going to say our heart wasn't in the right place, because I've always wanted to help and be, you know, I wanted to be in law enforcement. I wanted to be in the FBI. I wanted to help catch bad guys and things like that. But now, 7.5 years later, we do it because we want to, because it helps people, and because we enjoy helping people. So yeah.
Yeah,
I think I
I
just went
don't
on a
see.
soapbox there.
Right. No, I don't see anything wrong with taking money from sponsors or YouTube or Apple or Instagram, whoever wants to give you a check, because you're
Yeah.
doing a huge favor and service to the community and these victims' families. Like you've pointed out in the book several times, people are not getting the attention that they need. And people are not going to hear about these cases if it's not for podcasters and authors and journalists putting this information out and maybe drawing out some of the details. I wanted to talk about, you've got a 5 rules of life that you came out with. And in case you forgot them, it's do no harm, respect victims and families. Seems like a good one. Stay curious. Stay curious. I can't talk today. But respectful, research deeply without exploiting. Use your platform wisely. Don't confuse success with money, and keep going. When did these kind of rules come up, or did you kind of think of these along the way?
Pretty much we thought of them along the way. Just, you know, what we've learned over the years and how we've changed. You know, Through the Shadows, the book, like I said in the beginning, it started out as a deep dive into one specific case. And then what it really is, I feel like, the end result was a story. It was my story about going from a true crime fan to a victim's advocate and everything I did and learned along the way. And I think all of those rules I try to tie in the book specific cases or specific situations that sort of proved each point, if that makes sense.
Right.
And don't confuse success with money. I have to 100% give credit to Ken, my husband, my co-host, my partner. We actually had a conversation, and I was pretty down. You know, we had been doing the podcast, I think maybe like 3 or 4 years, maybe close. I don't know how many years at that point, but we weren't super successful. We weren't bringing in. We both still have day jobs on top of all of this. So
Was he selling propane and propane accessories still?
yes, he sure is. Yep. And I actually work for him. I'm the office manager of our business. We sell propane and propane accessories. That's
awesome.
our day job. So yeah, it's a little family business we have going on, a little family podcast, you know, we're always together, but I have to give him credit because this one specific evening, and I remember it in detail because it was a pretty profound moment where I was down and I was saying, you know, why don't we put on like live shows and have people buying tickets to come see us? And, you know, why aren't we getting picked up by Wandery or, you know, getting these big sponsors? And he said that to me. He said, you can't confuse money with success. Because he pointed this out. You know, he said, you need to think about everything we've learned along the way, the people we have met, the friends we've made, the impact that we have made on the community and on listeners and for families, you know, the help that we've provided to families and loved ones. A lot of times, you know, these families, they have a missing loved one, or they have someone that was murdered and it's unsolved. And eventually, you know, the news moves on. The police move on. The case goes cold. People forget about it, but they haven't. And they're still, you know, help me. But people stop listening. And all it takes is you just to listen. Say, I want to hear your story. Tell me your story. And just that small thing, spending an hour of your time listening to someone and letting them tell you their story is something super small that you can do that makes a huge difference. I can't even tell you how many people have said, thank you so much for taking the time to listen. And, you know, we giving them a platform, even, you know, in the beginning when we had hardly any downloads and nobody knew who we were and we were just getting started, we were still reaching more people than they were alone. So that's just something that's so important to me. And that's what I consider success. When a family member is so grateful to me and they give me this heartfelt thank you, and I can see it in their face and their eyes, just how grateful they are, that's success to me. So don't confuse money with success. We're fine. We sell propane and propane accessories. We are good. We don't need to make money on podcasting. I do this because I want to.
Yeah, and I was doing a show with Jason Blair a couple weeks ago. We were doing a show on
I just met him at CrimeCon.
Oh yeah, really super nice guy. We did a show on Ashley Loring Heavy Runner. And yeah, extremely smart, and I was grateful to do it with him. And one of the things that he pointed out is that he said that people die twice, that you have your physical death and then you have your death when you're forgotten. And,
Yeah.
I think that for people in our position, at least for me with Virginia Olsen, that was one of our goals right off the bat, was
Mhm.
to bring awareness to her name. And even though we know that the prosecutors will never actually name um, someone responsible, still just be able to say that, we've been on Nic Edwards, his podcast. We've been on Stuart Blue's podcast, British Murders. We've done countless podcasts throughout the U.S. And so, in a way, we're able to keep her name alive. And that's one of our continued goals. And I feel like that is something that when you're talking about in your book about the great white whales, that's what that remind me of, is those cases that you're like, no matter how old you are, you're going to get on your soapbox and make sure that people don't forget these cases.
Yeah. Yep.
Would you like to tell us about your great white whale?
Yeah. I've been holding back on that. It's always at the tip of my tongue because it is my great white whale, but the murder of the Sims family in Tallahassee, Florida, 1966, still unsolved. It was a mother, a father, and a 12-year-old girl. They were murdered in their home. And it's one of those cases where they know who did it. I mean, but because of bureaucracy, and I like to call it the good old boys system in Tallahassee, Leon County, and political ties with Florida State University, a lot of different factors factored in, and the killers, two of them, were never brought to justice. And I've conversed with one of them via email for several years, on and off, and it makes me crazy that he he loves to talk about it. I think he enjoys it because he got away with it. And he's like 77 or 78 years old now, and he's still on Reddit making comments about the case, you know? Like, if you didn't do it, then shut up. Fade into obscurity if you're so adamant that you didn't do it, but you keep talking about it.
Is he
And
providing details in emails, or is he just making commentary?
you know what's funny is, yes, he is giving details. His story as to what he was doing that night has changed so many times. And I think I counted, he gave me like 4 different uh, versions of what he did that specific night. And I mean, he's given me a lot of details about that, not about the crime. He really doesn't. No, I can't say that he's given details about the crime itself, but he does like to talk about the fact that he was a suspect and that he's innocent and he was here doing this, but no, he was here doing that. And yeah, I mean, obviously everyone's innocent until proven guilty, but the case is never going to be tried in court. I've given up on that, but it can be tried in the court of public opinion, and that's kind of where my goal is now at this point. And I don't make a point of accusing anyone. I make a point of talking about this case and writing about it. And this is actually the case that this book started out to be. And instead of just focusing on that, I chose to shorten it down. It's still very long. It's still a very, very long chapter in the book, but I'm still going to continue. It's my white whale, and I don't know what it is. It's a lot of different factors. I mean, it's the innocence of the people that were killed, it's the supposed motive. I don't want to give too much away because I actually did a 4-part series on Paradise After Dark podcast, and then I wrote about it in the book. I actually did an entire separate podcast, long form podcast called Massacre on Muriel Court, a name that I now regret because I don't think it's very, I think it's kind of an insensitive name, which is one of the mistakes that I made along the way. But unfortunately, I can't change it now. It's been about 3 years since I put that out. It was 12 episodes, and it's all about that case. And what I'm doing is just I keep putting the facts out there because I do have the facts. I do actually have a lot of actual police reports and autopsy reports and evidence lists. And I actually have a draft of a press release from the Tallahassee Democrat newspaper that was going to be released because there was an imminent arrest until somebody made a phone call, and the arrest didn't happen, so the press release didn't happen. But I have that draft, so it's kind of interesting. So what I'm doing with that case is keeping it alive, just because, like I said, the innocence of the victims, the surviving family members who I have been in touch with, and you know, it just makes me crazy that, because the audacity, the obviousness of who committed this crime, and the fact that they never got justice just eats away at me. It's my great white whale. It's my passion case. And I think everybody's got one. And
Right.
And that's why, in the beginning you talked about the different voices added into the book, the essays, the people, Nic Edwards, Sharon Newman-Edwards, Kelli Brink, Robin Warder. I asked them because I knew all of them had a passion case. And these are people that I know well and respect very much. And that's why I asked them to contribute. And I wanted to show different angles and there's so many different cases out there that different people are passionate about. And that's, how it came to be that the essays from the other people are included in the book. And just a fun fact with the audiobook, not only was I able to convince these people to write in my book, I was able to convince them to record their portion for the audiobook.
That's so cool.
So if you do end up listening to it, you're going to get Nic for Nic's passion case, Sharon, Kelli, Robin, all, their voices. And I think you can hear the passion in their voices when they talk about these cases. It's pretty cool.
That is so cool. And how can we support you and support the Themis Project and your other endeavors?
Well, obviously, I don't really, buy my book. That'd be great. But other than that, you can donate to the Florida Themis Project, floridathemisproject.org. You can donate if you can, $5, $1, anything helps. But, I think one of the most important things is we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, we are on TikTok. And like I mentioned, our public awareness campaigns, we do big social media pushes. We post a lot. And I think one of the easiest, most simple things people can do is follow us and share these posts, about these cases, share our videos, our reels, our TikToks, just to keep the word out there. That's what we're trying to do. And the more people that see it, the more people that share it. You never know whose ears or eyes you're going to land on. And it may be someone who says, oh gosh, I remember that. Oh man, I know something about that. And it's been 20 years. And maybe at the time they couldn't come forward for whatever reason, or maybe they didn't even realize at the time that they had this knowledge. And I have had people reach out to me because they didn't want to reach out to law enforcement. In 7 years, 3 people have reached out to us, our podcast, not the Themis Project yet, but the podcast, and said, hey, I have this information. Can you pass it on to law enforcement? And I have.
Yeah, and we experienced some of the same things with our book when we were investigating Virginia Olsen. We actually had some of her high school classmates reach out to us, and they said, hey, we got these. She was a prolific letter writer. And so they actually received letters after her death.
Wow.
Yeah. And law enforcement had never seen those before.
Wow.
Yes. And law enforcement had also not seen some photos that she had made by someone that were like advertising, and come to find out the lead suspect was in advertising. And there's a lot of things like that that had never come to the police attention. And quite frankly, I think it's because so many mistakes, happened in that case that there really just hasn't been a lot done with it. I'm sure they do an annual review, and that's probably about it. But you're absolutely right that I know there's a lot of true crime out there. There's a lot of Instagram profiles and TikTok accounts, but please, with the Florida Themis Project, a simple share, a follow, a like, all that gets into the algorithm and the word gets out there. And you really can make a difference by a simple social media post.
Yep. That's all. I mean, if you want to support me or us, that's the one thing I ask everyone. It's the simplest thing. Everybody's on social media, you know.
Well, where can we find you?
That's going to make the biggest impact. Where can you find me? Me personally?
Well, whoever you want to plug. You've plugged the Themis Project. The book is out there. People need to go and like and subscribe to Paradise After Dark.
Mm-hmm.
If you want me to do it like your husband, dark, 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 dark.
Oh my gosh. That's a funny story. Real quick, is he used to do that to get on my nerves. And then it became a thing. And our listeners would always do that. Dark, 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 dark. And they would come up to us at different events in CrimeCon and say, can you do the dark, dark, dark? And then it became sort of, then we had to continue it. But he started that out just to get at me, because I would be like, shut up, you know? But now it's just a thing. And it's not pre-recorded. He does that live on every episode.
That's so cool.
So, but yeah, so Paradise After Dark is also on all the social medias, except for X or Twitter. We just, that's too much. But Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram, the Florida Themis Project, Paradise After Dark. And then you can find me, it's Lauren Samples _FLA for Florida. And that's Instagram and TikTok. And then I'm on Facebook too. Yeah, I'm open, public. Friend me, DM me, follow me, all of that fun stuff.
All right. Well, one last time, the book is Through the Shadows, Unsolved Crimes, and the Search for Truth. If you would like to help me out, you can start off by buying my book, A Murder on Campus, A Professor, the Cop, and North Carolina's Most Notorious Cold Case. I did this book with my brother, Brian Santana. You can also like and subscribe to this channel, Santana True Crime, as well as follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And you can find me on Instagram, TikTok. I have an X account, but also don't really post much on there. But please give me a follow. If there's a case or a book that you'd like me to talk about, feel free to DM me. Lauren, thank you so much for coming on the show. And
Thank you for having me.
good night.
Good night.